Mama, do you think Santa knows where daddies live? The small voice floated through the quiet apartment like a fragile snowflake. Eleanor Whitmore paused mid-stroke, her paintbrush hovering over the canvas. Her 4-year-old daughter, Iris, sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by construction paper and crayons, her dark curls falling forward as she worked on something with fierce concentration. Eleanor set down her brush slowly, paint still wet on her fingers. "What are you making, sweetheart?" Iris held up a folded piece of paper decorated with stick figures and crooked hearts. "A letter to Santa. Miss Patterson at school said Santa reads every single one." The paper trembled slightly in those tiny hands. Eleanor knelt beside her daughter, throat tight. 2 years had passed since the accident that took Marcus. 2 years of explaining empty chairs at breakfast, of solo bedtime stories, of watching Iris search for her father's face in crowded parks. "Can we mail it tonight, before he gets too busy?" Iris whispered. Eleanor kissed her daughter's forehead, tasting salt from her own unexpected tears. "Yes, baby, we'll mail it tonight." What Eleanor didn't know was that Iris's letter wouldn't reach the North Pole. Instead, through a postal worker's innocent mistake, it would land on the mahogany desk of Colton Ashford, CEO of Ashford Technologies, 43 floors above the sleeping city. Colton had been working late again, not because of deadlines, but because his penthouse felt suffocating in its silence. 3 years since the family trip that should have been perfect. 3 years since the mountain road, the sudden storm, the moment that erased everyone he loved, his wife Grace, their daughter Lily, his parents, all gone in one terrible instant. He barely noticed the pile of mail his assistant had left. Christmas cards from business associates he couldn't remember, charity appeals, corporate pleasantries. He started to toss them aside when a child's handwriting caught his eye. "Dear Santa, please send me a dad." His hand froze. The words were written in purple crayon, each letter carefully formed. Below was a drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun, one small, one taller with long hair, and an empty space where a third figure should have been, outlined in dotted lines like a ghost waiting to be filled in. Colton read further. "My name is Iris. I am 4. My mama works very hard. She teaches kids and paints beautiful things, but sometimes she cries when she thinks I'm sleeping. I would like a dad who can make her smile again. I promise to be very good. Love, Iris." At the bottom was an address, an apartment building Colton recognized from one of the neighborhoods his company had helped revitalize. He sat back in his leather chair, this impossible letter resting on his chest, and for the first time in 3 years felt something crack open inside the frozen chamber of his heart. The next morning, Eleanor rushed through her usual chaos. Breakfast, Iris's coat, backpack, the eternal hunt for missing shoes. As a second-grade teacher and weekend art instructor, her schedule was perpetually overwhelming, held together by determination and terrible coffee. "Mama, look! It's snowing!" Iris pressed her nose against their apartment window. Pausing, watching the first flakes drift past the glass, Eleanor murmured, "Just like magic." What she didn't see was the black sedan that had been parked across the street for 20 minutes, its driver watching their building with an expression caught between hope and terror. Colton had spent the sleepless night researching. Eleanor Whitmore, 27, widowed, teacher, artist. No family nearby. Husband Marcus died in a collision with a drunk driver. He'd driven here on impulse, then sat paralyzed, unsure what he was even doing. You couldn't answer a child's letter to Santa by knocking on their door like some kind of... His phone buzzed, his assistant. "Mr. Ashford, the Children's Hospital called about your annual visit. They're hoping—" "Cancel it," Colton said automatically. He'd stopped doing those visits after Lily died. Couldn't bear it. But as he spoke, he watched Iris emerge from the building, bundled in a purple coat, her small hand tucked in her mother's hand. Eleanor's face was drawn with exhaustion, even as she smiled down to her daughter. They walked toward the bus stop, and Colton found himself following at a distance, his rational mind screaming that this was madness. The bus pulled away before he could decide what to do. He sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel, the letter still in his pocket. Then he noticed something. A small purple mitten on the snowy sidewalk, right where they'd been standing. Colton picked it up, soft wool still warm, and suddenly he knew exactly what to do. That evening, Eleanor heard a knock. She opened the door to find a tall man in an expensive coat holding Iris's mitten. I found this," Colton said awkwardly, "on Maple Street this morning. The name tag inside had this address." Eleanor's surprise melted into relief. "Oh, thank you. Iris has been heartbroken. Please, come in for a moment. It's freezing." It was the kindness in her voice that undid him. Colton stepped inside the small apartment, warm with the smell of dinner and cluttered with children's drawings. A keyboard sat in the corner, and music sheets were scattered across a coffee table stained with paint. "I'm Eleanor," she said, extending her hand, "and this is my daughter Iris." Iris peeked around her mother's leg, eyes widening. Then, with the strange intuition of children, she whispered, "Did Santa send you?" Colton crouched to her level, something loosening in his chest. "Maybe he did," he said quietly. Over the next weeks, what began as a returned mitten became coffee conversations, then Saturday morning breakfasts at the diner on 5th Street. Colton found himself drawn back again and again, to Eleanor's quiet strength, to Iris's infectious laughter, to the feeling of a life that wasn't hollow. He learned that Eleanor painted to process grief, that she sang to Iris every night despite having, as she laughingly admitted, a terrible voice. He learned that Iris wanted to play piano like her father once had, that she collected rocks because each one was a tiny treasure. And slowly, carefully, he told them about Grace, about Lily's obsession with butterflies, about the weight of surviving when everyone you loved hadn't.
"Sometimes I feel guilty," Colton admitted one evening after Iris had fallen asleep on Eleanor's couch, "for being here, for feeling anything good." Eleanor looked at him with eyes that understood too much. "Marcus used to tell me that love isn't a finite resource, that opening your heart to more doesn't diminish what came before, it honors it." He had to look away, throat burning. What Colton didn't know, what he wouldn't discover until Christmas Eve, when Eleanor found the letter tucked in his coat pocket, was that Eleanor had mailed a letter of her own weeks ago, not to Santa, but to Ashford Technologies, thanking them for the scholarship fund that had helped pay Marcus's medical school loans, easing her financial burden after his death. She'd written to a CEO she'd never met, never expecting an answer. When she recognized the name, the address, everything clicked into place. She stared at Colton, the letter trembling in her hands. You're him? The scholarship? The foundation? You're Colton Ashford?" He nodded slowly, waiting for anger at the deception. Instead, Eleanor started to laugh, a shocked, teary sound. "Iris's letter. It found you." "It saved me," Colton corrected quietly. On Christmas morning, Iris woke to find a keyboard beneath the tree. Not new, but carefully restored. The same one her father had played. The same one Eleanor had sold 2 years ago to pay rent. A sacrifice she thought Iris was too young to remember. "How?" Eleanor breathed. Colton had spent weeks tracking it down through pawn shops and private sales. "Every kid deserves their father's music," he said simply. Iris's fingers touched the keys with reverence, then looked up at Colton with luminous eyes. "Will you teach me?" she asked. Will you stay?" He knelt beside her, Eleanor's hand finding his shoulder. "If your mama will have me, yeah, sweetheart." I'll stay. Eleanor's voice was thick with emotion. Iris, honey, do you remember what you asked Santa for? Iris nodded solemnly. I think, Eleanor said slowly, looking at Colton, sometimes Santa answers prayers in unexpected ways. Not with magic, but with kindness, with broken people finding each other and becoming whole. Outside, snow drifted past the windows. Inside, music, hesitant, hopeful, began to fill the small apartment. The sound of healing. The sound of family reimagined. Colton pulled the original letter from his pocket, now worn soft from being carried close to his heart. He read it aloud one final time, voice breaking on the last line. Please send me a dad who can make her smile again. I'm not trying to replace your father, Colton told Iris gently. He'll always be part of you. I know, Iris said with 4-year-old wisdom, but maybe hearts are big enough for more than one dad. Mama says love is like music. It gets richer when you add more notes. Eleanor pulled them both close, tears streaming freely now. The most beautiful music, she whispered. Sometimes kindness arrives in our darkest winters, wearing an unexpected face. Sometimes healing begins with a child's innocent hope and a stranger brave enough to answer. Sometimes broken families find each other in the spaces between grief and grace and discover that love, real, enduring love, isn't about forgetting those we've lost. It's about honoring them by choosing to live fully, to open our bruised hearts once more, to believe that even in sorrow, there is still room for joy. The letter that should have reached the North Pole had found its way to exactly the right home after all. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.